Hi, and welcome to Coco Disaster. I'm Chorpsaway.
And I'm Zane Zero.
And today, we return to you to reminisce on the summer season of anime. Now, when we started out our look on the summer season, I think we were pretty middling to sort of kind of poor reception on it. It didn't seem like there were a lot of good standout shows from it, and it was a lot more like hedging our bets on things.
Yeah.
But I think it worked out pretty well. I was genuinely surprised by a number of the shows this season, and I still haven't gotten to all of the big surprises, the things people really started talking about. So it turned out a lot bigger than I would have expected. I'm joyously surprised.
Yeah, there was some real good stuff this season. Some stuff that I'd say would be added to my favorite list of animes of all time. Yeah,
totally. I mean, that's pretty high praise too. So yeah, let's get right into that after just some quick news stuff. Not a ton to say since the last time we got together, but one thing I found fascinating. So you may remember, I think it was 2016, we saw the English release of a mystery visual novel called Root Letter. And they're doing a new release of it that seems like it's kind of like an updated version, but one of the other things that they're adding to this game is they're replacing all of the anime art with live-action actors.
Oh, so they're pulling a 428 Shibuya Scramble.
Sort of like that, but it's instead of taking pictures on the scene, it's sort of using the photos they took for reference for the background art and shoving those in, and then just placing actors on top of it.
Huh.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the game is big enough that they have 90 actors going into this.
That is incredibly interesting.
Yeah, it's a weird choice to make, because I feel even with the release of 428 and stuff, that's just not a style of game that we see. Even FMV is really gone out of its way, but then to also use pictures for this, for visual novels and stuff just feels so alien.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never got around to playing it. I've heard sort of mixed things about it, but this kind of makes me more interested in it as at the very least a curiosity, as something to see how they try to translate that sort of thing.
Yeah, I can imagine that's interesting.
And then finally, something a little more close to, something I'm interested in. Kazuki Takahashi, the creator of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, is publishing a short manga soon in Weekly Shonen Jump called The Comic with a Q. And this is the first thing he's done since the manga for the Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. So it's just neat to see him, back doing something after such a long hiatus where really he just gets to act as, supervisor now and just rake in all of the rights money.
Finally, he can escape card games.
That's right. I mean, he hasn't had to touch that in a while, but yeah, he's trying to do something new for, I think it's the 50th anniversary of Weekly Shonen Jump, focusing on sort of a rookie manga creator and sort of a story around him and his secret to art. So I don't know if it's going to have attachments to biographical stuff or anything, but that could be neat to see.
All right.
And they're also doing a new Ruby manga.
Another one?
Yeah, so there was the one by Shiro Miwa before this, who did character design in Joker Game and Kiznaver and things like that, but this was sort of their first bigger project. And yeah, they now have a different manga coming out by, I think it's a newcomer. I couldn't find any information on this person besides the announcement of this manga, named Bunta Kinami. But it's fascinating how much Japan has latched on to Ruby, right? Given that Ruby is a very American interpretation of a lot of big anime tropes and things like that, then to see it return back to Japan and be just as popular as a look into American animation is just it's a weird cultural exchange.
Oh, yeah, very weird.
Because, like, they got things where, like, you know, full seasons were being played in theaters and stuff, right? Like, they're getting the same sort of treatment that we get with anime movies in the theater.
That's so baffling.
Yeah, so, I mean, good on Revue, right? Like, clearly they're doing something right. They continue to pull these people in, and they continue to, you know, do really well with the new seasons and stuff. So, yeah, good on them. It's kind of cool. Like,
yeah.
But that's kind of everything I had to say.
I had one thing to say.
Yeah, what?
I was just gonna say, the Punchline video game came out. It got a Western release.
That's right. It finally did actually release. Oh, that reminds me. Where did my copy go? But, yeah, so just wild that finally came out. Again, like 2 years after Punchline, the anime came, and after the game came out in Japan, we're finally seeing a release. So if you want to explore the world of Punchline again, then you have a chance. And I think we talked about this before, where the game has multiple endings and branching points that let you sort of escape the story of the show and see, like, very different parts of this particular story, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, you can get an ending in the game that is not the one that happens in the show, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like, it's a good way of producing something that can have consequences, right? Like, I think a lot of issues with anime licensed games of yore were like, oh, they're like side stories that can't really affect the characters in any way. But because this is such a tight story, and because it's, you know, based around sort of repeating time and trying these new things, you are more open to giving all of these branching paths and ideas to, like, really expand on what you expect out of the game. It's really cool, and I wonder how much of this was, like, planned ahead of time by Uchikoshi, you know?
I mean, given the whole repeating loop mechanic of the show itself, it definitely feels like a visual novel adaptation, even though it wasn't one to begin with. Yeah,
totally. And the whole thing just screams Uchikoshi in that particular style.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But yeah, I want to check it out, it's cool, but also, no one else is allowed in the house while I'm playing it. I don't need to answer the questions about Punchline. Alright, so, let's talk about anime now.
Yeah!
And to start off the discussion of last season's anime, let's talk about, I think, the biggest surprise that we had. This was one that we talked about sort of being interested in just because of the idea behind it, right? So this is Planet With, and if you remember before, this is created by Satoshi Mizukami, who probably better known for works like Lucifer and Biscuit Hammer, but this is a story that, like, had this particular release so that the anime and the manga would more or less match up release-wise, so that there weren't any issues with worrying about spoilers or speculation that could get in the way of enjoying the same experience as everyone else.
Yeah, that's really unique.
Yeah, so it's a very fast-moving series because of that, but it is fully fleshed in a way that is, like, very surprising.
Yeah, it doesn't feel rushed or anything is definitely a point for it. While it feels like it could have slowed down in places, it doesn't feel like we're really missing anything.
Mm-hmm. So the main plot of this story is that there's a high schooler named Soya who has amnesia, and one day he finds that his town is attacked by something called a nebula weapon. It seems like some sort of, like, extraterrestrial device. And there are 7 superheroes within the town that can sort of, like, reach another level of humanity and, like, develop this psychic armor that lets them fight these extraterrestrials. And Soya, in seeing them, sort of recognizes from his past that these are attached to the thing that destroyed his original planet, because he's not originally from Earth. And so with his live-in family, Ginkgo and Sensei the cat, he fights against these psychic soldiers and sort of like really starts to understand what's going on in the world. You know, what's causing these soldiers to appear, what's happening to these nebula weapons, and why all this is happening.
It's worth mentioning that, to talk about the fast pace again, he gets over his amnesia at the end of the very first episode.
Yeah, so one thing I have heard discussed about this show is that it's basically like a 52 episode series condensed into 12.
I mean, I'd say it's a 26 episode series condensed into 12, but the same sort of principle applies.
Yeah, it's a multi-season story told within 12 episodes, and like, you can really tell that because of how fast these revelations come out. Like, it feels like every episode is actually like 2 episodes because of how they cut the commercial breaks and everything. You feel like you leave on sort of a bigger revelation or something uneasy to set up the next part.
Yeah.
Like, I definitely watched this and was like, oh, that would definitely be a commercial break, or, yeah, that would definitely be an episode break, but it wasn't within the actual episode that I was watching.
Yeah, it definitely works to his advantage because it doesn't feel like it's wasting your time.
Yeah, it gets to the bare essentials. Well, not just the bare essentials, but, like, it really gets to the core of the interactions that it needs to set up these different parts of the story and kind of move things along with the characters, while also making enough time to move the plot forward.
Yeah. I think one of the show's strongest aspects is that you have a very reasonable idea of why all of the characters in the show are fighting how they are. Like, no one is this inexplicable force that's fighting because the plot says so. Everybody has a concrete reason for their actions, and you can get a little empathy for every character because of it.
Yeah, and not to say those don't change throughout the 12 episodes, because they change throughout those 12 episodes, but, like, you always understand the intentions of each character.
Yeah.
They're always laid out in front of you in a way that's easy to understand.
I think one other thing I want to talk about without going into spoilers is how really weird the mech design is for this show, because it's definitely very unique compared to everything else.
It's very animalistic, which makes sense since a lot of the mech stuff does in fact involve, like, extraterrestrial animals turning into mechs.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, even with the psychic soldiers and stuff, they have very animalistic sort of, like, builds to them.
Yeah, and I think it gives them kind of a bit more character to them. I think, like, it gives you, a bit of a look into their personality.
Yeah, totally. And, it's made very clear all these characters' personalities. It's all very well done in a way that, like, oh yeah, you never forget who a character is. And I think that's, like, another good benefit of it, is Planet With make sure every character they show is important in some way and that you will see them again.
Yeah, even when you don't expect them to.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, yeah.
It's really hard to talk about this show without spoilers because so much happens in it, but I can't say anything.
Yeah, and if you go in with this show thinking like it's any other mech series, like your Gundams or stuff like that, it's very not, right? It's a much more human story and about very emotional conflicts, right? It's not about a bigger war. It's about these ideas involving sort of like the evolution of species and whether or not you can trust people to be able to, like,
learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, learn from their mistakes and be able to grow without constant supervision in a way that is beneficial to everyone else.
I think another strong theme in there is the cycle of revenge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because that's what sets this whole thing off, and then it almost immediately, like, is realized to be like, oh, this is, like, really shitty, actually.
Yeah. I think you know what scene I'm talking about that's, like, halfway through the show that deals with how empty our main character feels after it's realized, and...
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good scene.
Yeah. Personally, I almost wish Planet With were the 24 episode length that it seems to, like, be structurally. Like, I kind of wish I had more time with these characters.
Yeah, because they're all really likable.
Yeah, and, like, there's definitely, like, gonna be differing opinions on how much room there should be to breathe between these things. Like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more, but understanding that it is what it is, it still doesn't detract, I think, from the overall narrative and what it's trying to hit.
Yeah, it definitely has a strong core to it that shines through.
Yeah, for sure. It just moves fast.
Yeah.
In the way that you might expect a story that is simultaneously releasing as a manga and an anime might, in an attempt to keep one from spoiling the other.
But yeah, Planet With is a real treat to watch.
Yeah, and it really does defy expectations a lot in terms of, like, you expect the themes to start one way and it switches gears later on and then does it again as you sort of, like, are given more information about the world.
Yeah, and it manages to dole out that information at a pretty reasonable pace.
Yeah, totally, and the character designs are charming.
Yeah, I do. I like all the character designs, especially for our good friend Sensei and the Generalissimo.
Yeah. The fact that the, like, biggest supernatural force in space are just, like, basically, like, Animal Crossing characters is really something else. Like, it really, like, lets you know this is going to be, like, weird early on in comparison to other shows of its type.
I mean, I think you could tell it was going to be weird when you saw the appearance of the first Nebula weapon.
Oh, no, certainly, but, like, if you look at the art for it, it's like, oh, okay, this is, like, a cat-ish sort of mech, but everything else sort of, like, you know, matches together with these anime ideas, but as soon as you see, like, as soon as you see Sensei, you're like, oh, alright.
Oh yeah, that happens first. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. I'm just saying from like concept art to the show, you're given like a stark contrast of like, no, this is what you're in for. But yeah, Planet With was good, and I was genuinely surprised by it in like a really good way.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I definitely recommend it, and it's nice that I can recommend a shorter series to folks.
Oh yeah, totally. Like it's definitely one of the more solid, like, self-contained series that we've gotten this year.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, a show that, again, I think, like, really defied expectation was Shoujo Kageki Revue Starlight, which you watched.
Yes, I did. So, Revue Starlight is about these 9 girls that go to a theater school. I forget what the actual name of it is, but it's basically an entirely theater-focused school to get them hyper-focused into acting, singing, dancing, all that sort of stuff. And one day, a mysterious transfer student arrives, which is one of the 9 girls, named Hikari, and she has an important childhood promise with the other main character of the show, Karen. And 8 of these girls get invited to this mysterious audition where they have to battle against each other with very stylistic theater conflict fights, and the winner of these battles, this round-robin style sort of battles, is going to become the top star. And everyone is fighting to obtain this, and Karen kind of intrudes on this in the first episode and jumps in, fights the battle to protect her friend, and it basically goes on from there, and it is very much a character study about these characters, as well as the difficulties of growth.
Oh, so yeah, it is very much what people thought when they're like, oh yeah, this looks like Revolutionary Girl Utena.
Yeah, it kind of is. It's also definitely as gay as Utena.
Oh, I just seeing screenshots, I'm like, oh yeah, absolutely, this is all Utena. But just with like a more theatrical sort of tone to it, or a very different sort of theatrical tone.
Yeah, it does. Not that I've actually seen Utena at all, but I mean, the way the fights play out with them literally on a stage with props and backdrops showing up to do these fights is really, really neat. Mm-hmm. But the fights are also really good. because they all help develop these characters a bit more. They all help them grow as people. It's not, oh, hey, a cool fight. There is purpose in all of these fights that are had, and it's really, really interesting to see how these 9 girls grow and change over the course of these episodes and just become better people. This is another show that's hard to talk about without spoilers, because, like, one thing I can say is that the show seems to start off fairly weak, because you don't really have any reason to care about Karen and Hikari and their childhood promise until, like, a couple of episodes in, when we actually get more background information about what happened between the two of them and what kind of relationship Hikari and Karen have. And then after that, they start going into and developing the other characters, and we get to see, like, little vignettes of what their deals are. And not even every episode is about a fight that Karen has. The focus is on the fights that other characters have instead of just ones that Karen has. And it's really interesting to see how these clashes change over time.
And all the fights are set to, like, musical songs that, like, are very direct references to the conflicts they're having, like, emotionally and characteristically, right? Like,
yes, very much so. This is one thing that the official subs do not do, is translate these extremely important contextual songs, probably because of either licensing rights or they didn't have enough time to do so. But this is, like, one of the few situations where I'd actually go and say, hey, if you want to watch this, you really need to go look for fan subs, because they translate the song lyrics, and those are kind of important to the character development.
yeah, and it might be a case where, like, they're waiting for the official release to give out these rights, so once that's done, they'll go and update the subs. Like, I know Funimation did that a lot when they were picking up exclusive shows. Like, halfway through, they'd get the official lyrics for, like, the OP of an anime, and they would go back and they would add those in. I assume something similar would happen with Revue Starlight, given that they're important to the story, right? Like,
yeah,
the fact that this is so integral to the plot and these characters, it feels like one of those things they'd have to go back and do.
Yeah, and this show's choreography, not just during the fights, but the way it's framed and shot during all of the different episodes is all really, really tight and good. It's got a good sense of style about itself, and it helps, keep its thematics very strong.
Mm-hmm. So, before we continue with that, since it seems like you're pretty set on not spoiling people, again, like we were with Planet With, because it's a show based on style and characterization in a way that, like, benefits a watch, right?
Yeah, it's very hard to explain this sort of stuff, like with Planet With, because of it doesn't shift quite as fast as Planet With, obviously, but when it does shift, it changes the dynamics of the show in a very major way.
Okay. So, a couple things then, just before we go. What about Banana? Explain Banana to me. I see everyone seems to be way into the banana-haired girl, and I don't know anything besides the banana hair.
She is just a really good character. That's pretty much all there. Like, this is another one of those spoiler cases. I can't talk about it because she is a really good character because of those spoilers, but also she makes everything bananas, and she has a banana phone cover case, and she says bananice.
Okay, I'm looking at this character's name, and it is Die Banana.
Yes.
All right.
But yeah, like, overall, it's a really fun show. It's got the top star element is a nice surreal element that kind of adds to the mystery of the show. And I think, it's nice that shows just have this surreal thing in it that isn't overly explained why this is happening. It's just a thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's just got a nice cast of characters, a nice sense of style. I just really enjoyed it. It's got a nice, satisfying ending, too.
All right, cool. Now, for something I just watched, and is predominantly based around girls and choreographed sequences that are more about defining a character than the action that they're actually doing, Hanebado. So, Hanebado is the badminton anime, and as much as it is about, like, playing badminton, sort of, like, understanding why you play a sport even if you're not, like, the best at it and you recognize that, it is also, like, a lot more invested in the fact that the way that they play defines their characters and how these characters evolve and develop. And so, Hanebado it's also not a sports anime in the way that, like, you really feel like everyone's having fun when they do the sport, and it's about how fun the sport is. A lot of the time you feel like badminton is the most grueling and, like, exhausting sport in the world based on the way that these characters play their matches.
Yikes!
Yeah, it's very heavy on the dramatics, and I think in a way that works, right? But it's like everything about, like, the art, you know, like the concept art and the opening and the ending are all, like, very kind of upbeat and cheery, and then when you get into the episode, it's people, like, literally about ready to, like, break their knee playing this game because they need to prove something in the court, or, you know, these people, like, breaking down because of the way the match is going. It's not a fun watch, and I think that's something that should be said about it. So the main focus is on this character named Ayano, who is a first-year student at this high school, and she's really good at badminton. She not only has, like, pretty good natural ability, but she's also spent a lot of her younger life sort of practicing and developing her skills, but she's very avoidant of it now that she's entered high school. She wants to escape that part of her life because her mother at one point abandoned her, seemingly because she was not good enough at badminton. Her mother's, like, a world-class player who's won several, like, world championships and just leaves one day after Ayano is, like, unable to beat her and, like, has these issues with the way that she's playing. And so she is eventually dragged back into the badminton club, where suddenly all of these characters directly related to her trauma suddenly show up from other schools and play against her. And as much as the story is about other characters, especially, like, Nagisa, who's this third-year student who has, like, physical issues that stop her from being able to play her best in badminton, is, like, Ayano is the central character here as she sort of, like, re-explores why she likes badminton and, you know, what it means when she gets on the court and why she plays.
Okay, when you said it was heavy on the drama, I did not expect that heavy on the drama.
Oh no, absolutely. And, like, one of the later characters that becomes, like, Ayano's rival is literally the girl that her mother, like, adopted and turned into a badminton, like, prodigy.
What?
Yeah, no, it's insane. Like, second episode, you learn that her mother left to, like, a European country and picked up this girl named Connie, who became a new, like, badminton prodigy. And then later, mom comes back and tries to act like none of this is weird.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's the show you're getting into when you watch Hanebado. And, like, it does the dramatics really well. It's very heavy on dramatics, but I think for the most part, it does it really well. Like, and especially the way that it is able to balance sort of these more lighthearted moments where they're outside of the club and they're just, like, being friends. And then when it comes to actual badminton and the way that it sort of, like, really feels like Ayano is, like, playing out of spite and this very different sort of, like, motivation and how that changes throughout the series.
So it manages to have this heavy sense of drama, but without it feeling too ridiculous. It's believable. Or it makes itself believable.
Yeah, the only, like, kind of, like, comical part of it is the fact that the way that they demonstrate that Ayano is sort of, like, breaking on the court is that she gets sort of those horror anime eyes where, like, the pupils disappear, and they'll just draw her like that for the whole thing. And so it really does look like she's gonna murder someone.
Terrifying.
Yeah, I think it's a good show. I think overall it does it what it wants to do really well. What I understand from the manga is that it had a real, like, identity crisis early on how to balance sort of, like, comedic elements and dramatic elements. And the anime seems to have smoothed that out a lot. There are only one or two scenes where it's like really pulls into this weird state of jokiness that feels like wrong, given the scenes before and after it. But like, for the most part, they've really ironed this out in a way that's like, it is an almost pure dramatic story from front to back, and like ends on a really hopeful note for all the characters about like rediscovering why they play, even in the face of all this different sort of adversity that they run into.
Nice.
It's a good show, I think, and it's just, don't go in expecting it to be like fun, because it really isn't. So next up, let's talk about some shows for kids. And the first one up is Professor Layton, Cat's Mystery Solving Files, which you've continued with, and continued your frustration with.
Yep, it's something. I said this the last time I talked about it, but the quality of the show is all over the place, because for this season and last season, the show has been one of four things. It's either been a good original episode that screams that this is definitely Professor Layton, that makes me scream with how ridiculous the plot twists are and how much less sense everything makes once it's explained. A mystery that's just kind of bad and uninteresting. A case from the game. Or, once a season, you get plot.
Alright.
Yeah, and, like, the back half of Season 2 has been all cases from the game, and it's incredibly frustrating. I thought that they would kind of work that out of their system after Season 1, but no. They need to pull more cases from the game that for some reason you haven't played, even though you're watching the show about characters from the game.
Okay, are they out of cases at this point?
No.
Okay. Because I thought the game was, like, relatively short in terms of cases. But are they, like, multiple episode things? 'Cause
no.
Some of those cases get long. Okay.
No, they are not. After next week's episode, I think there is going to be exactly one case from the game that they haven't done yet, and it's the final case.
Okay, which they're probably saving for, like, the end of their 50-episode run.
Oh, God. Having that be the finale would frustrate me. No, they're probably going to save the final episode of plot for that.
Maybe, yeah, but, like, closer to the end.
Yeah. So hopefully Season 3 will have more good original content and less cases from the game, because it's getting really frustrating at this point.
Yeah, I can understand that. Like, there's definitely a difference between, say, Persona 5 the animation, where you're going expecting to see most of the same content you have, and this thing that, like, can't decide whether it's an adaptation or its own set of stories.
Yeah, because I thought it was going to be its own set of stories when I started watching this, but...
And it was for a bit, I think more so. Like, I thought early on it was all, like, different cases.
Yeah, a bit more in Season 1.
Yeah, so I understand where that becomes, like, a frustrating issue for sure.
Yeah, especially since next week's episode is the third week in a row that it has been a case that has been straight from the game.
Jeez, that's a streak. Ugh.
Yeah, but hopefully they're running out. They are almost out of cases from the game, so hopefully I will get to see some more good original content next season, or if I don't, I'm gonna drop the show, because one episode of plot is also getting to be incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. You think maybe if they run out of games, like, oh, right, we should do more plot stuff, too, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
Like, this feels like the longest build-up to the announcement of another game, like, in the universe.
That is what fills me with the most dread, honestly. That it's just a build-up to, oh, you thought you were going to get the plot in this show? Well, too bad. Go ask your parents for money to buy this game.
Oh, well, we can only hope.
Yeah.
That it becomes its own distinct thing better than that.
Yeah.
And then my big show for children was Cells at Work. Well, I guess it's not just for children, but, like, it's framed in the edutainment way that you might expect it to be for younger audiences.
Oh, it's framed that way, huh?
Yeah, so Cells at Work is the Osmosis Jones anime, It's not really. It takes itself and, like, it really focuses on this sort of edutainment look at biology and stuff. The focus is on teaching you how your body works by turning all of your bodily processes into, like, anime events. So you have, like, a focal point. You have the one red blood cell that you focus on and the one white blood cell that seems to show up a lot. And yeah, it's just, like, telling you what happens in your body in different situations. Like, you know, the second episode is like, oh, there's this scrape wound, and it's how, you know, bacteria goes in and how your body sort of, like, fights against these different things and closes up the wound. And then there are other ones like, oh, the person gets food poisoning or allergies or heat stroke. Like, it has this very diverse look at all of these different things like a healthy body may go through, and just, like, what your body does to counteract that.
Huh.
And it's really charming in that way. So, like, every time that you meet, like, a group of platelets, it'll be like, oh, these are the platelets. This is what they do in the body and how they interact with these different things. And they're all sort of, like, more or less, like, kind of anime tropey sort of, like, character archetypes for each of these different parts of the body, but, like, in a very charming way, right? Like, they are characterized just enough for you to understand, like, oh, you know, this is shorthand for this is shorthand for this, that kind of thing.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a very cute show, and gets, like, surprisingly dark near the end, where it's like, the last 2 episodes are a 2-parter about someone going into hemorrhagic shock.
What?
And, like, what it's like in your body to, like, basically lose so much blood that you are near death, and just the way that, like, your body functions on the inside, and how that, you know, sort of the emergency routines it uses that end up hurting it more than helping it. It's like, again, it's just, like, surprisingly dark for when they start out with, like, oh, this guy has allergies, and these, like, doofy sort of, like, globby cedar pollen pieces show up and, like, aren't really dangerous, but they're big, so they scare everyone. And it's like, oh, all of the blood cells died because all the blood shot out of this man's body from his shock that he got into.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it goes places, but, like, yeah, just overall, Cells at Work is a very charming show, and, like, you interact with the same characters in their archetypes that, like, you do build a little bit of a connection with them. And apocryphally, I've heard that certain, like, message boards on the internet have reported that there are people that are, like, eating better and exercising and stuff to protect the little anime characters that live inside their body, which, if that's true, God bless Cells at Work for what it does. Like, the idea, oh, people are drinking more water, you know, to take care of themselves, and they're eating healthier. Like, oh, great.
It feels like they could be, like, textbook mascots.
Yeah, totally. It does give off, like, it's half a textbook and half a manga, for sure. And, like, through this, a lot of people have discovered, like, the spin-offs, like Cells at Work Black, which takes place in a man who is overweight and doesn't take care of himself and has sex with strangers, so, like, constantly getting VDs. And, like, it just takes place in, like, a nightmare world.
Finally, the darker, edgier spin-off.
It totally is, too, because, like, it uses a male red blood cell instead of, like, the female one from the original series, and the male white blood cell gets turned into this, like, big titty warrior who, like, has half her shirt unbuttoned for no reason. It's
amazing.
Yeah, it has a multiple spin-offs, all by different authors and stuff, that are just, like, different bodily things that happen and, like, how they affect the body. Like, there's one that's, like, bacteria at work, and I think there's one that's called Cells That Don't Work, which is, like, I assume about the more, like, latent parts of your body. But yeah, and, like, Cells at Work is not unwilling to get ridiculous, where, like, when it does, like, its episode on, like, cancer cells, it's basically like you're watching, like, an entire arc of Dragon Ball Z, and the way that they do it, like, there are so many takes on, like, sort of, like, these particular, like, shonen anime tropes and the way that these characters interact and fight and stuff And it's like comically violent in like a Kill Bill way where like a white blood cell will attack a bacteria and blood will just spurt out over half the screen.
Hell yeah, I love anime osmosis jokes.
But yeah, no, it's just a very charming, simple show. Like, it doesn't try to be anything more than, like, educational and entertaining, and it definitely captures both of those really well.
Yeah, it sounds really charming.
Yeah, it's good. And now, the last of our explicitly for children shows, Gundam Build Divers, aka Dot Hack with Robots. Tell me about it.
Gundam Build Divers. Gundam Build Divers is a fun, dumb show about kids and a couple older folk playing an MMO about Gunpla, and it's another fucking toy commercial.
Right. Oh well, of course it is. It's Gundam.
Yeah, but yeah,
it's just more explicitly one.
Yes, it is very fun and it's very paint by numbers a lot of the time. Like, the best parts of the show are when they're just goofing off doing MMO things and just having a good time with their friends in MMO, like just doing stuff that you would do in an MMO, like, oh, we're gonna take on this quest together, oh, there's a special event, let's do that. And we're gonna bond with our Gunpla, oh, let's have a fighting tournament with our Gunpla and show who's the strongest, and it's very goofy and silly, and then like, the back half of Season 2, oh, hey, here's a plot. Hey, remember when the character that's basically Aura is here? Well, she's basically Aura. And now, because she's a bug in the system, we must destroy her. No, we must fight the mods to protect our anime girl who is created by the love everyone has for their Gunpla.
Cool.
It is the most anime, but it is just... It's so silly and so trite that, I don't know, I kind of like it. It's definitely not a good show, but it is a fun show some of the time, and there's like a million dumb Gundam references, like the group of people that are all just Gundam characters in masks, or just a bunch of other like goofy Gundam references. There's a lot of good stuff in the show, and it's just a fun, silly watch, some nice junk food. But I do have to mention that the best part of the entire show is when everybody meets up IRL after the plot is done, and we just get to see them hanging out IRL at a karaoke bar, and it's great.
This is good. Great.
Yeah, it's just a fun, goofy show. It's not, like, none of the characters are really anything special. I still wish Koichi had been the protagonist, because it seems like he has the most character out of any of the characters, but... oh well, what can you do? Yeah. And it's also like one of the few... again, it's one of the few shows that does this MMO concept that not everybody would want to be a plain normal human. There are cat girls. There are furries of many shapes and sizes. There are elves piloting Gundams. It shows a nice variety in the kinds of people who you would see online and their personalities, and I think that's cute.
Yeah, I remember seeing a couple Harus as well, I think it is.
Yeah, Haros...
the Haros. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's great because the Haros are the guest character avatars.
Oh, that's cool. Also, like, when you invite your friend over to play and you don't want to get them a new account.
Yeah.
That rules.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It's just a goofy, silly anime. It's not gonna blow you away or anything, but it's just, fun.
Yeah, alright, great. As far as another popcorn show that I ended up watching... Harukana Receive, the beach volleyball anime. Ooh. So I watched this with a friend who was interested in it, and it's not a booby show. Very, very little to the booby action in this show. It's an ass show, though. It is a show that, for good volleyball reasons and not, is really fascinated with the asses of these characters.
A new Keijo.
That's right. Well, I mean, they don't use them in the same way that you might in a Keijo, but yes. But yeah, Harukana Receive is like a perfectly acceptable sports show. It's not really great at anything, but like nothing about it is like so bad that you might want to stop watching. I didn't think. It's like just right in the middle of like, oh yeah, this is a comfort food show where and especially in comparison to Hanebado, it's like everyone loves the thing they do, and so they do it. Like, very little drama to go with these characters. a little bit of like inter-character sort of stuff, but nothing that's like all-encompassing. It's mostly just these characters having fun and enjoying themselves playing a sport that they all enjoy.
It sounds like you started watching this as a counterbalance to Hanebado.
It really feels that way after the fact, yeah. It's just, these characters have fun and they do what they want to do. I was reasonably charmed by the characters, and they all have these very cute designs. They play off each other well. And the action gets the point across with a bit of flair, though, like, not to the same degree as other sports anime like Haikyuu. It doesn't aspire for anything more than that, and I think that's perfectly fine. So now, I don't know what to say about this show, but you watched Asobi Asobase.
Asobi Asobase, I can say, is my problematic fave of the season.
I've heard that it is weird humor, and sometimes that weird means gross out.
Well, I'll talk about that. So...
Alright!
So, Asobi Asobase is a fucking show about dunking on your friends as hard as possible, and incredible over-the-top reaction faces. Asobi Asobase is a fake-out show because the opening of the show makes you think this is going to be a cute girls doing cute things anime. It is not. It is definitely not.
Yeah, having seen those characters, I would be hard-pressed to call them cute all the time.
Yeah. So, it is a show that has some really good-ass humor. It is occasionally gross, but it also has some nice joke continuity to it, which helps keep the humor up to a very good quality. It is a very spiteful sort of comedy, and it made me laugh a lot during it. But also, after a few episodes, there's a problematic bit. It was a sequence called Loaded Questions, and oops, it's transphobic. Whoops. Yeah, and I thought, okay, well, good. I could just tell people to skip this, because it's not like that's going to become a recurring character or anything. Whoops, that's a recurring character, and the same uncomfortable atmosphere happens every time that character shows up. Whoops.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah, at least they didn't show up too much, and the rest of the show is really funny and high quality. God, it is also a very gross show, as you mentioned, but the transphobic parts make me not able to recommend this show to anybody, which is why I'm calling it my problematic fave of the season. Also, the ending is an incredibly big departure from the ending, featuring death metal.
Oh!
It's great. It is one of my favorite dumb jokes in the show, is the massive gap between the OP and the ED.
And I remember hearing that, like, it had a lot of, like, sections where it would even escape sort of, like, animation and do, like, puppet sequences.
Oh, those are just doofy, dumb post-credit jokes.
Oh, okay.
Those are also really good. But yeah, if you are, able to withstand that there is a character that transphobia follows around, then you should watch Asobi Asobase. But if that's not your thing, then don't watch it, because it is my problematic fave of the season.
Yeah, good to put that out there in the front then, Especially if if it does end up like, oh yeah, it's a recurring character, then that's gonna...
Yeah, I think they show up like 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And like the episodes are usually like 3 joke sections of jokes, but it's often enough that...
Sure. So, my comedy of the season was Mr. Tonegawa Middle Management Blues, which is a spin-off of the Ultimate Survivor Kaiji series, which, if you're not familiar, is the story of a man named Kaiji who constantly finds himself in, like, millions of yen worth of debt and has to play these very elaborate sort of, like, death gambles in order to pay off what he owes. And this story within it is about before the first death gamble of Kaiji. It's about the management team of the Tei organization who set it up kind of like trying to figure out how to get this money back and entertain the like hyper-capitalist boss that they have, who constantly demands attention and entertainment. And so like no one wants to fight against him, so they have to just keep going with his more and more like inane demands for things. So like half the episodes are about, oh, we have to deal with this guy and putting together this death game. And so far through the first season, they're like setting up all of this stuff for the first game, which is this rock, paper, scissors thing that happens on a cruise ship. And so like it goes between that and sort of like just the troubles of having to work in such a hostile environment as this. So even without the connection to kaiju, you still get a lot of comedy episodes that are just about kind of dealing with the least likable boss in the world, which works if you're like familiar with sort of that Office experience, right? You may recognize yourself in some of these characters or people you've worked with before, and it's charming. It's not always laugh out loud funny, but they really sell every joke. So I think you're at least, you're at least guaranteed like chuckles, if not actual like guffaws for the way that they do their jokes. And it goes from things like, oh, I'm dealing with going on this business trip and having to keep everyone in check and trying to keep them happy after a really bad situation, to like, oh, one of the guys who got fired is now trying to get me into like this weird Ponzi scheme class that he started, where, he's very clearly going to get arrested for like this fraud thing that he's bought into. And so it goes through these different things, and like definitely the best part of the show is based on an understanding of kaiju, where like you expect all of these people behind this to be sort of like cruel and sort of like terrible people, but like you get to the situation where like, oh, they've built these tables that they use for the rock, paper, scissors things, because you're supposed to like drop cards in as sort of like limiting the number of actions you can make during the game. And like they don't have the electronics to work it, so they start building these elaborate setups inside so that humans can handle it. And so it's like, oh, this guy built a tiny cat cafe under his table so that he would be able to sit there for 4 hours at a time. Or one guy has this sweet gaming rig set up within this tiny cramped space. So like it feels a lot about like diffusing a lot of the terror of the original series in a way that it definitely makes it hard to recommend to anyone who isn't already familiar with the series.
So it's very much a supporting series, then.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you might enjoy the part where a guy accidentally walks in on, like, an eating challenge and has to, like, fight his way through it because he's too much of a man to give up. But so much of it is reliant on sort of this referential humor to kaiju where, like, oh, this character brings out this grill so they can do this great barbecue. And it turns out that grill is one of the, like, torture devices they use in kaiji to, like, more or less, like, burn someone as they have to, like, bow in front of someone for forgiveness. And so, like, that's the big, like, ironic twist of that. So, yeah, it does expect a recognition that makes it hard to watch if you haven't watched, all 52 episodes of this show from 2006. So, it's good, but it's gonna be hard if you're not already a fan of the overarching series.
Nice. Is there anything you're looking forward to in season 2?
So, yeah, we have one more core of this, and I'm not sure what's gonna happen with season 2. I don't know if maybe it's gonna go, like, behind the scenes of, like, the actual gamble that Kaiji goes through, or if it's gonna start going up until... So, at the start of the first episode, it, like, reminds you that the main character, Mr. Tonegawa, ultimately loses a match with Kaiji and is forced to bow down on top of this giant grill, and sort of, like, that's the point where we lose his character in Kaiji the series. So I wonder if it's all building up to that, or if we're just gonna get more sort of, like, kind of surreal slice-of-life-y stuff going in forward. But it'll be interesting to see what they do with it if they decide to go, like, all the way up to where this character exits Kaiji.
Alright.
Now, once again, our checkup on the slowest consistent show on our list, which is today's menu at the Emiya family.
Yeah. It's still really fun and charming to watch. There's been really not many changes here. Like, you know what you're getting into by now if you haven't watched this show. It's the Fate cast just having some nice slice of life adventures with no real threats to their well-being or whatever. Featuring, hey, you can cook this really tasty meal if you watch this show, because the steps that they put in there are pretty dang accurate. I will say this, the most recent episode, October's, Shiru made karage, and dang, did that sure make me want to try making some chicken nuggets myself.
Hey, that's kind of what you'd want out of that show, right? Like, if they're going to be making food, you'd want to be like, oh, that food looks good.
I mean, yeah, they go into a lot of good detail with the animations and the process, and it all looks really good.
Mm-hmm. So still just, like, no expectation of, like, a twist at any point. This seems very sincere in how it's just about this particular sort of thing.
Yes, it very much knows what it wants to be, and I can't imagine they would pull some kind of weird twist in the last 2 episodes.
Okay, now, spinning off to the next thing that I want you to talk about. Fate Extra Last Encore Finale. The movie-length ending to the original show that you watched last season, or the season before this.
Yes, I can finally actually give my thoughts on this, because it actually, had an ending this time. This was the ending.
Mm-hmm. Very different than the other Fate thing you're watching.
Yes, extremely. So, Fate Extra Last Encore is a show that, much like Mr. Tonegawa's Middle Management Blues, is a show that best feels as a complementary piece to the video game Fate Extra. A lot of what it does relies on you having knowledge of what goes on in Fate Extra, not just the setting, but also the characters themselves and the twists on those characters that happen to them. I don't think would have as much weight if you didn't actually play Fate Extra. Especially considering how the main conceit of Last Encore is, what if the main character lost against the final boss? Which I think is a pretty interesting direction to take. But it falls off of that conceit, and a lot of changes happen to the characters that the protagonist met along the way, and it's really interesting to see those twists and how they play out. And I think it's overall an enjoyable show if you do have that knowledge. The finale did feel pretty satisfying to me, and I enjoyed seeing the end of Hakuno and Nero's journey through the Moon Cell. But I don't feel I can recommend this show to anybody who hasn't played Fate Extra, because you just wouldn't have that extra knowledge.
Okay, so it does not work as standalone as, like, the more traditional Fate adaptations, like your Fate Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works, and such.
Yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing I want to say is that Hakuno and Nero, I think, work pretty alright as protagonists, with Hakuno being extremely deadpan and Nero being extremely energetic, and the two play off of each other pretty well. This show has a very good sense of style about itself, because Shaft is really good at that.
Right.
But, yeah, it's still a tough to recommend show unless you, like, know what the material is it's coming from. So, oh well,
okay.
That happens.
Did it do the head tilt?
Yes, it did. It did it
Thank
several
God.
times. It was pretty great.
So, moving forward, we have the quick list of dropped shows. And in terms of the ones that we singularly watched, they're both comedies. So to start us off, talk about Grand Blue Dreaming.
Grand Blue is a show about bad things that happen to you in college because you drink too much.
Uh-huh.
Grand Blue is a show where alcohol poisoning doesn't exist, and you can drink as much alcohol as you want until you puke and pass out and terrible things happen. But I stopped watching this because the first major arc was the worst part of Persona 4 with the cross-dressing pageant. So I just turned around and said no.
Yeah, that's a bad look and a bad first look for sure.
I don't have anything else to say, really.
I dropped out pretty early of Chio's School Road as well, because it's like, it seemed so inconsistent with its comedy, and like it looked, I'm gonna say, pretty bad. Chio's School Road just is kind of like an ugly anime, and its jokes are more or less based around the fact that the main character Chio is like insanely awkward. So like Chio School Road focuses on Chio, who is this girl who, and most of the jokes are based around things that happen as she's walking to school from her house. And a bunch of like misunderstandings that happen, or like weird happenstance that go on, like, oh, she accidentally knocks over this motorcycle that a biker owns, and so she has to like pretend to be like a serious badass to try to get him to move away, because if it came down to fights, she just would not be able to do anything. So it's like things like that, or like her doing parkour to get around like construction and running into like terrible people that she enacts like vigilante style justice on. But like the actual joke part of it is supremely inconsistent, and like it just feels like this show, at least early on, like as far as I got, didn't know what kind of humor it wanted to be. It didn't know like a style to stick with, and so it's trying all of these things and throwing up the wall, and so few of them seem to actually work unless you're into sort of like that style of, I guess cringe is the word I'm looking for, like that very sort of awkward laughing at someone because of these circumstances happening to them sort of humor.
Oof.
And so it just didn't work for me, like, really at all. There were bits and pieces, but overall it just didn't feel like something worth sticking with.
Alright.
And then, the big drop. Both of us had to give up on Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS.
Yu-Gi-Oh! VRAINS.
It just got really boring more than anything else, and like, that's fucked up when you're talking about a show that takes place in VR where literally anything can happen.
Yeah, it felt like they had a lot of budgetary issues making things look interesting.
Yeah, and like, the character stuff they're doing is still like, idea-wise, very neat, because it's so much about sort of like these villains trying to abuse the fact that these main characters are all dealt with these very traumatic situations in their life, and sort of like gaslighting them and like taking advantage of them to try and get what they need out of them. And it's like a triumphant story about how these characters sort of overcome that, but like that's never the focus. The focus is on the bigger part of the plot, which just isn't as interesting, and none of the characters are written well enough for you to like feel really invested in the fact that these cool things are happening to them. Like, just straight up, like the whole thing, like it's just such wasted potential, and like in a way that like it doesn't make for a train wreck, it just makes it for like a really boring sort of outcome.
Yeah, like I can explain when I dropped it, which was like after a filler episode, because that's what you need. You need filler in your anime original show. We got to find out, oh, this is when we finally learn the backstory between Kusanagi and Playmaker, and it's like, did anybody really care about this? Like, Playmaker needs Ai to be a better character, because without that, he's just a big sourpuss.
Yeah, and like, you could have had him grow. Like, he's gone through so much in the first season that like, you know, the first arc, that's like, oh, this is the point where he realizes that he's being shitty about this, and he can now develop his character. And what he does instead, he's like, he just looks at the script and says, fuck you. Like, that's how it feels. Like, the whole thing is just like, fuck you for expecting me to change. I'm still, like, just the least interesting Yu-Gi-Oh! Protagonist.
Yeah. Like, Soulburner actually seems to have a character and had character development in the past, but it seems too little too late at this point?
Yeah, and like, even then, like, he's just stealing spotlight from other characters.
Yeah, that's the real fucked up part about this, is that, like we said last season, a lot of the first season was, wow, check out how cool Soulburner is. He can beat up all the old characters.
Right, like, you build up all these old characters, and you're like, oh, check them out, like, they're neat, and they're playing into this idea that slowly Yusaku's gonna make friends, and, like, Yusaku's just like, fuck you, to all that. And so, they end up becoming, like, side villains, where it's like, no, we need to prove ourselves in our own arc. And then Soulburner shows up just to being like, no you don't. This is my story now. Get out of there. So yeah, it's just there's so much wasted potential throughout the entirety of this show.
Yeah, apparently the plot decided to come back after I dropped it, and it turned out that Dr. Kogami, with his plans of, oh, I must destroy the Ignis because they're evil, turns some of the Ignis evil, because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. God damn it.
Right, like, I looked at some of the stuff, too, after you talked about that, and it's literally just like, oh yeah, I have now retroactively justified my experience because I have incited this war against these AIs, so now the AIs are fighting against me and becoming villainous. See? It's everything I said it would be, and like, fuck off!
That's the most boring way that this could have developed, really.
And they're doing the thing still where they're reintroducing new, old summoning concepts for all the different characters so that they can continue to try to like sell new anime cards to fans, and like that's cool. I like that part of this whole thing. It's just, you know, the rest of it that's the issue.
You can't see it, but I'm shaking my head.
It's just, man, the show should have been so much better. For a show that starts out with one of the characters using a card that is literally just called, like, DDoS attack, it should have been so much better than it ended up being.
Yeah.
Alright. Well, let's move
on to better shows.
Yeah, we can only get more mad from this, so let's cut this out. So, the first one I want to talk about is Banana Fish. And before I discuss the story of Banana Fish, I want to put it out right away. This is a series that deals with a lot of sexual violence. It deals with topics of rape. It deals with topics of child prostitution, things like that. And it is not afraid to be very upfront and direct about these things. There are situations in this story where there is, in fact, an implied rape scene. If these things are not comfortable to you, you may want to actually just skip this section of the podcast and the show, because that's what this is. This is a pulp show that deals with these subjects and is not afraid of them.
Oof.
So keep that in mind as we move forward. Banana Fish is very much a pulp action series done in the way of, like, it really shows its age, right? Banana Fish was originally written in the 80s. And while the setting of the anime has been moved up to modern day, you really feel that sort of, like, I'm not going to say, like, unaware sort of thing about the 80s, but, like, it definitely feels like it comes from a different time, a different type of storytelling used to, like, shock and surprise viewers. The main focus is on a boy named Ash Lynx, who is the adopted heir of a mafia leader named Dino Goldzing. And he is not only an adopted heir, but he's also being sold in Dino's, like, child prostitution ring that he runs to keep the money flowing. So now Ash at 17, sort of, like, sick of the way that he's being treated under this, decides that he's going to break out from Dino and sort of, like, not only kill him, but sort of, like, rid all of New York, which is where it's set, of, like, his influence. And a lot of this comes from the fact that Dino is also developing this, like, super drug called Banana Fish, which basically, like, put his brother into a vegetative state. His brother was in Iraq for the war and fed this drug, and it causes him to go berserk and kill his fellow platoon mates. it like rotted his brains, that he was still living, but he can't like act on anything. And so the main focus is on Ash and his story and sort of like breaking out of this just like horrible situation he comes from and trying to make it on his own and sort of like figure out what happened to his brother and get vengeance for that. At the same time, Eiji Okamura, who is sort of this young photographer coming over from Japan to sort of like as like a study abroad sort of thing, he ends up getting roped in as he runs into Ash for the first time, sort of unknowing that all this is going to go down, and shit almost immediately goes down and sort of entwines Ash and Eiji's lives in a way that like brings them together not only as friends, but it seems pretty clearly from the first 12 episodes that they are also reaching like a romantic side of their relationship, but also this very gritty sort of crime story that they're telling.
Huh.
Yeah, Banana Fish is a story that is definitely, it's a long original manga series. I believe it's like a 19-volume series, and it's being condensed into 24 episodes. So things, I assume, are being cut out, and I assume a lot of it is like more of the fluff parts of the story. More of the like the parts developing these particular sort of like romantic relationship parts to make space for the tangled web of like mafia interactions and character drama that they've built out in this story. And it's a show that is very dark. It definitely goes to some dark places. At one point, Ash is sent to prison for an action he takes against Dino. And it's an extremely pulp 80s prison where like literally the biggest threat is that everyone in the prison inexplicably wants to like rape a person, right? Like that particular sort of fear, you know, that trope. And yeah, that's the story it's telling, is one that is like, it doesn't exactly revel in the way that it uses sexual violence, but it's not scared of it, and it's ever present in the narrative as like a threatening device. Right? These are the threats that this character deals with, and it's about the character fighting back against these things, and sort of like, it's hard to say what the intention is because I still have half this anime go to. I enjoy it for the action parts and what it's doing with these two characters' relationships. I think the character writing can be very entertaining in both its serious moments and the occasional comedic bits that they use, the more lighthearted bits in between these sort of action sequences. And I think the story is pretty gripping with how it delivers each beat and is able to escalate the stakes. But like, it gets to uncomfortable points, and so it can be difficult sometimes to stay with it. Especially since this is a weird translation choice, but they use a homophobic slur in the subtitles for this show on Amazon that, from what I understand, is not present in the original, and like is very much like a punching up of the story to try to fit that pulp narrative, which is like, that sucks.
Yeah. This sounds like this is your problematic fave of the season.
Yeah, it's super that. It is so deeply rooted in this like problematic core that you can't escape that. And if you enjoy the show, you have to accept that that's what it is. That's what Banana Fish is. That's what it's doing. So I don't think like it's wrong to enjoy this. I think it's just something you have to recognize for what it was at the time and what it looks like now, you know, 20 years after its release. No, almost 30 years after it started releasing as a manga. So, yeah.
Yeah, this sounds extremely displaced.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely feels out of time, and like a lot of the things from the, you know, from that time feel out of time at this point. You know, we, as a society, we have developed and changed so much, and we understand and are respectful of so much more, that parts of this feel outdated, especially when they try to make it like, oh, this is happening in effectively 2018, right? Like, they're moving the story forward, but the politics of it are still deeply rooted in the time that they came out.
This makes me remember 91 Days, which was also a mafia story, but that was one anime original, but that took place flat out in Prohibition era, I think, Chicago.
Yeah, and it directly avoids a lot of the more problematic things that, like, Banana Fish, uses in its narrative.
Yeah.
It's so much more focused on the revenge aspect, where Banana Fish is sort of about, like, this incredible seedy underbelly of New York, and, like, the way that, like, politicians get in with mafiosos and are using this drug for war and stuff. Like, it has a very big bite to take, and we'll see if it can chew it, right? Like,
yeah,
there's a lot going on with its story, and I don't think that it's, like, it's wrong to try to do that. Like, it's clearly built up sort of this development to it. It's just whether or not it ends up sticking the landing.
Yeah, alright then.
Yeah. On a lighter note, I don't even have the schedule up, but I know that no matter what we're talking about, it's lighter than this.
It's significantly lighter.
It's My Hero Academia 3rd season, which just recently finished.
Yeah.
And has already announced, oh hey, get ready for the 4th season.
I mean, considering how the 3rd season ended, that's not a surprise.
At this point it's not a surprise that they announced it, but they're like, oh yeah, it seems like it's primed and ready for 2019.
Yeah.
So, the second half of this series decidedly lighter than the first half, whereas the first half was about sort of the Bakugo retrieval arc, and sort of like, building up the heroes and finally having our first taste of All for One as our primary villain, right? Our end game boss.
Well,
Definitely described that way.
He is definitely described that way.
Give me that much. I don't read the manga, so I'm not farther in.
I mean, it's more of how, of his little speech towards the end of the season of how he wanted to pass something on.
Right.
Which makes me feel like he's trying to pass on his role of final boss to, Shigaraki Tamura.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like he's trying to pass the mantle.
Mm-hmm. So the second half of this is school stuff. It really feels like it's set up for season 4. Not a bad way. I think that plenty is accomplished throughout this, but that's what it feels like. And the first focus is on Deku's goal to differentiate himself from All Might. After a speech where he kind of comes to terms with the fact that he's just trying to emulate his hero and not trying to be his own person.
Also, how trying to emulate All Might has literally been incredibly self-destructive for him.
Right. Consistently, people are like, oh yeah, if you keep, like, fucking up your arms, you're just never going to be able to use them ever again, so how about cut it out? And Deku's solution is, I'm going to become the kicking hero, which is, like, it's charming how simplistic his, like, if I can't punch like All Might, I'm a kick. He gets his cool gauntlets and stuff, it's great.
Yeah, Deku is very smart, but he is also very dumb at times.
Yeah. So then, the following episodes are focused on the hero license exams, or like provisional hero license exams.
Yes.
Allowing these students to be able to, instead of being in like a more internish role as they were in season 2, in the next season, implying that they would be like more or less like backup heroes, right? They would be
sidekicks.
Doing the job. Yeah, sidekicks. They'd be doing the job alongside the pros.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really liked this, especially as a break from sort of like the heavier content coming out of the end of season 2 and now the beginning of season 3. Like, the fact that they just got to kind of have fun and still like have that sense of urgency and like importance to the story is like really good.
Yeah, and we got to meet some interesting new characters and develop some more characters that we know.
Yeah, we met different hero schools too, which is something I didn't quite expect.
Yeah.
They're very cool, and like interpersonal conflicts between schools with like Todoroki, and like Todoroki got a lot of good characterization out of it, like recognizing where his faults are still from the way that he's trying to escape, the shadow of his horrible, terrible father.
Yeah, I appreciate that Todoroki realized that he was becoming sort of like his father on his path to escape his father's shadow.
Yeah, and just the fact that it's basically just like, hey, stop being so self-centered and worried about, taking care of this yourself. Recognize, that you have to work with others.
Yeah, which was the whole point of the second half of the exam to begin with.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just a lot of fun, like meeting the new characters, seeing the old ones be able to interact, and even the fight between Deku and Bakugo was like pretty good in setting up their rivalry in like with a different perspective.
Yeah, I think this is where Bakugo's real turning point as a character has started.
Right. House arrest will do that to you.
Yeah, but I really liked that for once, Bakugo is finally not being too consumed by rage to actually express himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Deku and Bakugo are actually able to reach an understanding of each other, and I think it's a strong point for both of them to going forward.
Yeah, totally. And like the new UA heroes that we meet at the very end of the season are very good.
The big three, Naruto, Bleach, and One Piece.
Mirio's a good boy, even if he constantly shows his willy to the students.
Mirio is extremely good. He is a good boy.
And I'm interested in the villain that they've set up for the next arc, because it's not anyone we've seen before. Like, it feels in a lot of ways that, like, early on, it's like, oh, there's this rogues gallery being built up around Handsman, but now we're, like, getting new people that are, like, comparable to him and trying to do, like, their own thing, it feels like.
Oh yeah, what did you think of the spotlight on Twice?
Twice, I'm not sure what to think of. I think that was a cool setup, like, to get to that. I'm not sure what that means for Twice or the villains going forward, but it's, like, a very cool look into who that character is, especially because, like, you didn't get a lot of that. He was, like, the most underutilized during that whole sequence at the training camp.
Yeah.
It's, like, a really good framing device to sort of, like, get you a little uneasy, because you're like, oh, why are they focusing on this character? Are we seeing into the mind of, someone who's, like, looking on it from the outside and is jaded? But it's like, no, this is a villain, but, like, this villain has this, like, quirk to them that's affecting them in this very strange and tragic way.
Yeah, it kind of gives you a sense of the League of Villains as a different sort of gang of misfits.
Yeah, and definitely, like, with that scene, Jin has become the most, like, sympathetic of the villains.
Yeah.
It's the first time you see a villain and you're not just like, oh, they're just, like, a bad person. Like, this is the first time it's like, oh, this guy's, like, got, like, psychosis issues, and his quirk or whatever is, like, affecting him in this way that causes him to have these issues. And he's just, like, and it's, like, just fucked him up so much that now he's going in and he's, like, he doesn't know what to do, so he goes in with this bad group.
Yeah, I really like that, and I kind of hope we get that sort of development with the other main League of Villains characters later on.
Yeah, because, like, a lot of those villains just seem like, oh, they're crazy.
Well, there was the lizard guy who's just an edgelord.
Right, but you look like Himiko, and it's like, oh, this is just the yandere that they put in for all the yandere fans out there. Like, are they going to try to make her, like, more of a character? I don't know. Like, maybe. It probably is going to go more like the route of, like, Dabby?
Yeah, Dobby's definitely due for some spotlight because of his shtick.
Yeah. I expect to never see Muscular or Mustard again.
Yeah, I think that...
But, I think
they got...
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think they got arrested, so they're effectively out.
Yeah, so, we'll see how they do with that as they go forward. We'll see what they do with some of these villains.
Yeah.
Because, like, outside of the ones that we've now named, who's left? All the Nomus? They're not going to do that with the Nomus.
There's, Kurogiri.
Oh, right. Yeah, the teleportation man.
Yeah, the bartender.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe something with him. And finally, let's talk about, I think this was the best anime this season. Lupin III, Part 5.
What a ride.
Yeah, so Lupin III, Part 5, as we talked about previously, is sort of split up into, like, movie-sized stories that have, in the end, like, a collection of characters that continue to show up and affect the plot. And the second half of this gets way farther into that, including the final story, which is, like, oh, I think it's fantastically done. Not only tying in all of Lupin's previous adventures, like, you know, setting up as a character that all of these things are canon and have happened, but also, like, giving a good resolution, like they did in Part 4 with, like, Rebecca. They give a good resolution to Ami and, you know, some of the other, like, characters within the gallery. Like, I feel, like, completed with the arc of Albert, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Albert's going, like, if they do another Lupin thing, Albert would be the villain of said thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's trying, like, from the ending of that, it seems like he's trying to establish his own sort of rogues gallery collection of allies like Lupin has.
Yeah. Before we get into the plot stuff, since I feel like the last two like story bits tie into each other really well, I want to talk about the individual stories.
Oh yeah, those are really good.
So the first one that they did within this season was Lupin has to pretend to be a detective. So, like, solving the mystery of someone who is expecting to be, like, killed and have their, like, prized jewel taken away from them.
Yeah, it was a charming little bit.
Yeah, that's a good one where, like, Lupin doesn't do anything really cool. He just, like, shows off how smart he is, and it's just, like, solving this, like, locked room mystery in front of a bunch of people and sort of, like, working out these ideas.
Yeah, and the twist up with the mystery at the end was pretty funny.
Yeah, no, it's good. The whole thing's very cute. Then we have the episode where everyone got a shit. So the idea behind this one is, by the end we discover this, but, like, Fujiko came over and Lupin was just, like, blasted on alcohol. He was drunk off his mind and had forgotten his anniversary with Fujiko. And so she had dumped like a bag, like some kind of gift for him in the toilet, and it clogged the toilet, and now everyone got a shit, and they're all having problems because the toilet's clogged.
The episode, the gang has to fix their toilet.
Yeah, and also have to deal with Zenigata at the same time who's coming around. They have to, like, deal with the fact that they can't poop, and also, like, have to put on this whole, like, oh, they're old people shtick, and they, like, invite him in and, like, feed him noodles and stuff.
God, Goemon got some really good, goofy characterization in that bit. I liked all the character bits in that one episode.
Yeah, no, it's also, like, just the most, like, down-to-earth sort of situation I feel like Lupin's been in since 2015 Lupin.
Yeah.
Like, no thievery or anything, man just gotta poop.
But yeah, it also felt like this maybe served as a nice setup for some of the issues that they bring up in the final part.
Right, with, like, Lupin and Fujiko's relationship, and you see here where it's, like, it's already, like, a little rocky, and it's been rocky throughout the entire season, but, like, it builds to something here.
Yeah.
We get a good Jigen episode. Like, everyone has sort of had these singular episodes throughout with these, like, one-offs, and Jigen gets his here where he's sort of, like, first of all, gets to prove how much of a good marksman he is, but also, like, it goes into his backstory in a way that, like, I feel has never been done. Like, he always gives off this very specific type of character now that he's, like, an old curmudgeon, but, like, this shows a much more sensitive side to him as he has to deal with, like, someone from his past who was also a marksman, like, in the same, like, soldier group that he was when he was younger.
Yeah, an old comrade.
Also, does not explain how time works with the Lupin group where, like, someone that Jigen knew grew up, had a child, that is then the same age that the mother and Jigen were at the time, but Jigen is still, like, kicking it.
I mean, I think we established time works weird when they established that Lupin looked exactly the same as back when he was working with Albert, and that was before he became known as Lupin III.
Right, they're just eternal beings, I guess. We just have to accept that they've had a drink from the Fountain of Youth. All of them.
I mean, that could be one thing Lupin stole. He stole immortality.
I wouldn't put it past him at this point. That's a good one where, like, Lupin gets to be on the sideline and just, like, basically he just plays, like, chess with an eccentric billionaire while Jigen has this, like, character moment while he's sniping against someone. It's good.
Yeah.
And then finally, the last one is, at some point, Zenigata loses his memory, wakes up in, I think, Russia, and is taken in by, like, a couple of thieves, and find out that, like, because he's been tracking Lupin and knows so much about Lupin, he's also, like, really good at thievery, so he starts becoming a thief to, like, try to steal back his identity as he, like, you know, kind of figures out what he's doing.
God, Zenigata is such a doof. He's so good.
God, it's such a good episode, too, right? Like, it really shows you how his character is, like, so tied to Lupin, like this kind of red string of fate sort of thing. And is a better thief than Lupin, but because he's on this, you know, the side of the law, you know, he's constantly, like, kind of bungling his way through and not being able to catch Lupin when he could just steal things before Lupin did.
I do like that by the end of the episode, Lupin was extremely just trying his damnedest to pull one over on Zenigata.
He's just so pissed that Zenigata is continually better than him at this whole deal. And part of that's probably like his subconscious. He's like, oh, I know how the cops do this, so I can work around that too. Very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the story that we get through the second half of Lupin III is primarily focused on Ami as a character. First of all, in like the way that she's learning to separate from Lupin and understand her relationship with Lupin and these other characters as she tries to live a normal life and how she gets ripped away from that.
Yeah.
Like the first story we get is the story of this princess of a country that is divided literally and ideologically into sort of like, you know, super advanced technology and sort of like more traditional values. And, you know, there's this whole coup situation going on that involves like the FBI and the American government. And so it becomes sort of this like political intrigue story of how they can try to save this friend that Ami's made and be able to like restore peace to this country that's just about to go through a coup.
Yeah.
And yeah, it explores Ami really well in her relationship with Lupin, and that's like the big thing that then sets up the final confrontation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this also like drops bits of the problems that have cropped up between Lupin and Fujiko, and how Fujiko really wants to know where she stands with Lupin. It also introduces the Shake Hands Corporation, who plays a very large role in the last part of the show.
Right. So, then the final arc is where this Shake Hands organization has basically built an app that uses all of the data that, like, Facebook and other, like, social media groups steal from you to be able to, like, target things towards you, like ads and stuff. But what it's used instead is to sort of, like, force everyone to be more honest with other people. Like, at the start, it's like, the big thing is like, oh, it's being used by people to find, you know, like, cheating husbands and stuff like that. And eventually it's like, oh, this is also being used to sort of, like, capture all the data they have about Lupin and try to figure out how he's escaping and what he's using for disguises and be able to, like, see through the things that he does to try to, like, smokescreen people from recognizing him.
Somewhat of a retread of the first arc.
Yeah, but, like, on a much grander scale, right? Like, it's not asking humans anymore to be able to, like, target him. It's like, oh, this app will just always tell you where Lupin is, and, like, if you say anything into this app, it will grade based on all available knowledge in the universe how accurate it is.
Yeah.
And this comes to a head because Lupin can't keep up with it, right? Like, he is outdone by this piece of technology to the point that it looks like he's gonna get killed and, like, finally captured and, like, done away with.
Right. I think it's also worth it to mention that during this, Goemon has his own little arc of trying to figure out what he means to Lupin.
Yeah, there's a whole story of, like, relationships and how this app generates them, and, like, Goemon is suddenly thrown into a loop because the leader of Shake Hands tells him, like, says into his app, like, Lupin sees Goemon basically as, like, a pet, like, as it's something to be protected, like a prize.
A treasure.
Yeah, a treasure. And so they explore that as, like, Goemon wants to understand what his relationship is with. And I like how we have, like, Ami asking this, we have Goemon asking this, we have Fujiko asking this. Not at a single point does Jigen give any shits. He's like, yeah, Lupin pays me, whatever. The fuck, I don't care. I'm gonna be here complaining about my toothache and being mad about ghosts.
I think I like for when Goemon has this whole crisis, an old-ass Goemon from one of the past Lupin shows shows up in his mind because of this.
Yeah, and there's that whole bit where, like, the leader of Shake Hands is showing all of these clips from previous Lupin series where Lupin and Goemon fought.
Yeah.
And it's such a stark contrast to see what Lupin was and is now.
Yeah, it's I think the series as a whole asks the question, or at least wants you to consider the question of, can an IP like Lupin really be considered relevant in the year 2018, or going forward, or whatnot?
Yeah, and, I mean, of course the answer is yes. But yeah, it really wants to ask the question of, like, the relationships that those shows built on implicitly, and, like, really ask, like, what you're expected to think of these characters and their relationship, because it's like everything's just taken for granted because it's just set up that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, it ends with a really good confrontation where Lupin is able to, like, evade security by using the destroyed remnants of the castle of Cagliostro.
Right, that's his hideout from where he plans his counterattack, and it's great.
Yeah, and it ties in all these other characters from different movies and, like, the movie canons. Like, at one point, there's this movie exclusive character, I don't remember the name of the movie, but it's a character named Diane who, like, she owes me a favor, so she gives me a new car, that shoots out from this aircraft carrier. Like, it's so crazy. It's really cool, though, because it acknowledges the greater canon of Lupin in a way that, like, even Part 4 didn't really do. Like, it wants you to appreciate all of what Lupin has been.
Yeah, it makes Lupin feel more like one big cohesive whole.
The Lupin cinematic universe is real, people.
Extremely real.
And yeah, so, like, by the end of it, it deals with the idea of, the relationship between Ami and Lupin by, like, not denying that this is, like, a crush that she has on Lupin, but, like, also understanding, like, the boundary that exists between these characters and her need to be her own person.
Yeah. I think a nice thing that Ami acknowledges towards the end is that she and Lupin are very similar and that they both enjoy that thrill-seeking rush.
Oh yeah, totally. And maybe the biggest reveal of all.
Ah, yeah, the big reveal that may or may not have broken a certain character's brain.
Who knows if it's even a reveal, right? Like, it's framed in such a way that I'm pretty sure, like, anything is possible. And so the idea is that Fujiko is like, we've had this relationship for all this time, and sort of, like, it ended on these terms in this situation, and I just want an answer of what I mean to you as a person. And it's like, and Lupin's like, I'm gonna show you the real me. And Lupin takes off his face which apparently is also its own mask, and reveals his true face to everyone in that room. And we don't get to see it.
Yeah.
And so we're left wondering if this is a Kakashi situation where under his mask is another mask, or like what's going on. But presumably this answers the question that has been brought up by Fujiko in a way that like kind of gets them both back together in the same sort of like weird way that Fujiko has with Lupin.
Yeah, it's a really nice, show of trust, but also, it shows that that Lupin has a lot of tricks, that his whole performance as Lupin III is an act, and that maybe we've never really seen the true Lupin.
Right, like, he does this because he enjoys it and he finds it fun, but like, there's clearly more to the character that even we, the viewer, having spent 50 years with him, don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just everything about that season so well done. Just absolutely, like, fantastic, I feel. Like, just solid all the way through.
Yeah, it's a really great ride from start to end, and it's just a fun, bit of character exploration of what Lupin's deal is.
Yeah, totally. And, like, not often does it, like, make you rethink, this character basically within the classic canon, but, like, it does in such a way that, like, it gives you more information, but, like, also has you, like, yearning for more. Like, I really hope this becomes, like, not more frequent, but, like, they come back to Lupin more.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, like, a new Lupin movie every now and then.
Yeah, and, like, that crazy son of a bitch, Ichiro Okochi did it. He made a full series. There are no issues with the whole thing. God bless you, Mr. Code Geass.
Oh my god, I forgot this was written by the Code Geass guy. Congrats on making something that wasn't a hot mess.
Congrats on just a good, consistent story. Fantastic. Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, what a ride.
And maybe part of that has benefited from the fact that, like, every so often 2 or 3 episodes would be stolen away by, like, someone else writing in the style of old Lupin, but still.
Yeah, the 4 main, I guess, OVAs were really good.
And that's the season.
Woo!
Yeah, we got out of here pretty early, but, I mean, like, we didn't watch as many shows, maybe, as last time, but, like, we watched some good shows this season.
Yeah, there was some real quality anime this summer.
Yeah, a lot to say about them, just like it's just a good spread of different types of shows, right? It does really feel like, there's a good something for everyone in this season.
Yeah.
And I don't think currently fall's looking any different. Like, I haven't had time to catch up with most of the shows as they've premiered, but like, from what I've heard, it's got to get a pretty good spread, and like, a lot of the stuff we expected to be good is good, and a lot of the stuff we expect to be bad is still bad. So, I mean, at least we're good on that front. Like, we're able to guess pretty well.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to see. Oh, God.
I was gonna say basically the same thing. I'm excited to see fall's anime delights going forward.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's just, there's still plenty that hasn't aired yet. We're sort of just getting the first wave of stuff, and hopefully, by the end of this, we all just come out with some good shows.
Yeah.
It seems like we weren't entirely correct with some of our guesses, but that doesn't mean that the shows that we're not interested in still don't interest us. Specifically, I'm thinking of Zombieland Saga, which is like, oh, this looks like kind of your exploitative sort of horror thing. Apparently it's not. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, I did. I heard, oh, you thought this was a zombie thing? Well, guess what? It's zombie idols, baby!
Right, which is just like, it's its own different sort of like, wow, I can't believe they made a twist that makes me like less interested in watching it. They really done did it. But hey, there's an audience out there for that sort of twist and sort of that irreverent sort of humor, so, God bless them. But yeah, so, like, between that and, like, everything else, it's like, oh, Ace Attorney 2 looking a lot better than the first season, just, like, production-wise, and, like, it feels just as snappy and good, and, like, keeping the pace that the first season did. That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that adaptation turning out well.
Yeah, JoJo's Part 5 had a strong start.
Yes, they put in one of the most iconic scenes in Episode 1.
That's right. I forgot, like, some of the framing behind it, because, like, everyone only takes that one clip from it, but it's, there's something so great about, like, trying to like, pretending to leave the train And then as he, like, turns the thing into an eyeball, he just, like, comes in through the window and, like, I'm gonna eat your sweat now. Like...
This is the taste of a liar, Giorno Giovanna!
Oh, it's so good. Ugh. But yeah, so I'm sure we'll have more to say once we're able to watch through everything. But yeah, I'm looking forward to next season, and I'm glad summer was so good as well.
Yeah, me too. I'm real looking forward to fall, and I'm real happy to talk good stuff up about summer.
Yeah. And speaking of talking about summer, we have a little bit more to say because we've got some fan mail. The first one comes from friend of the show, QB. And this is more of like a PSA for all you out there. It's hard for me to remember anything that happened this season that wasn't Revue Starlight, but remind your listeners to not forget about High Score Girl, which got licensed by Netflix and will likely be on that platform in a few months. It's a truly unique adaptation that should be experienced. And, yeah, I mean, that's always kind of a hard thing about the Netflix things, is we don't get a chance to talk about them in their released form. And even if we, like, you know, download the subs for it, like, people aren't going to see that sometimes for months.
That reminds me, I didn't watch Tenro Sirius the Jaeger because it was picked up by Netflix. So whenever that gets picked up by Netflix, I guess I'm going to be watching that.
Yeah, and I think it's 24 episodes, so we might see the first core soon and then the second core later.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we see that soon, because yeah, the more I see from that, like just the designs and like shots and everything, especially from the concept artist, it like looks really cool. Like I'm getting more and more into like the look of it as things move forward. So I would hope to see it sometime soon.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, and then also follows it up with, if you want a question, all I got is #DabWatch2018. Who would dab from summer's anime? I say the two leads of Banana Fish. And I think, you know, putting them in 2018, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like, they're a little more hip. I think if anyone from Banana Fish is going to do it, it's Shorter Wong, though. Shorter is, like, sort of this... He definitely feels like he's kind of the hipper, cooler sort of person. He's, like, the boss of Chinatown. He's got, like, a purple mohawk. He seems like he'd be way more into Fortnite than any of the other characters, you know?
I'm pretty sure, one of the characters from, Planet with Nizuya?
Oh, the Chunibyu.
Yes, he would definitely dab.
Oh yeah, he would dab, but he would like try to make it seem like it's way cooler. Like he's not just dabbing, right? Like,
yeah,
you know, he's calling forth spirits or something. I think there's definitely like a lost episode where Lupin tries, either Lupin or Princess Dolma would absolutely teach Ami how to dab. That episode exists somewhere, even if it's only in my mind, and it's good. I think that's the dab watch, right? Those are the main focus ones.
Yeah.
Does anyone on Asobi Asobase dab? I know they get into like the whole like pyramid occult thing, right? They do that. They hip enough to dab.
I think Hanako would dab because she is so desperate to be popular, and dabbing is popular, right? So she'll dab as hard as you can. So I learned this the other day because my brother is like 13, so he keeps me up to date with like the new fresh memes. And apparently kids these days are using default as an insult for someone that they look basic in reference to the Fortnite default like avatar that is given to all the characters when they start. Oh my god.
I think that's like, first of all, the most savage thing that a child could say at this point, but it's like, that seems like the sort of thing, if this character is supposed to be like desperately trying to be cool, the kind of like language that they pick up on.
That extremely seems like something that should have caught on already by now, saying that someone looks like a default avatar. Right.
But I guess like just Fortnite is the thing big enough to finally get that into canon, basically.
Jeez.
Anyways, that's it for this episode. Zane, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Twitter at Zane0, XAINZERO, where I usually tweet about whatever is currently interested me at the time, which currently is nothing. Or it's just whatever anime I'm watching.
Hey, video games are coming out soon.
Yes, they are.
There's Fist of the North Star. That just came out, actually.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to The World Ends With You Switch version, now with all the music forever.
Right, and basically like an extra mode that's like, hey, sorry we never made a sequel for this. Here's an after story with the character that we teased.
I mean, the other thing is, Tetsuya Mora apparently has claimed that, oh, if you want Twooie 2, please buy Twooie Switch. Please.
It does feel like the extra mode is like an apology for the fact that Twooie 2 didn't happen yet.
Please, appease our corporate overlords. I really want to make this game.
That could be his next big project after Kingdom Hearts 3 is finally out. It's coming out!
It's real.
Swear to God. It's real. They keep showing footage of it, so it has to be. And as always, you can find me at Chorpsaway, CHORPSAWAY on Twitter. You can find the YouTube channel where I post video versions of this podcast and other great video game content by going to youtube.com/c/Chorpsawaysa. And you can find the podcast by going to Twitter, and we are Coco_disaster there. You can find us at cocodisaster.com, where you'll find our latest episodes, you'll find links to our RSS feed and our backlog, and also a link to the text-only and only anime blog on the internet run by me and friend of the show, QB, where we talk about stuff that just maybe doesn't fit into the podcast format, or we don't want to pull out our microphones to talk about. And you can also find us on all of your favorite podcast catching services, things like iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And you can leave reviews there if you want to and tell us about how gosh dang charming we all are. Anyways, it's time to talk about the single servings, and boy howdy, do we have did I remember to time the release of this first one correctly so that it would be the Spooktober episode.
Ooh.
Join us soon for the release of an episode on Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust, a gothic horror series, probably most known in the West for being illustrated by the man behind the main illustrations for Final Fantasy.
Amano?
Yeah, Amano is the original character designer for Vampire Hunter D, the novel series.
Ah.
Yeah, so keep a lookout for that. I'll be doing that episode with returning guest Hobotron, and then later I will be doing an episode with a newcomer and friend of the show, Heptamy Ride, who will be doing an episode with me on Ping Pong the Animation. I feel like one of the first big sort of Science Saru animations to come out that really let Masaki Yuasa sort of like, stretch his limits and show what he can do. So, look out for that, and make sure to send in fan mail for that, either by sending it to chorpsawaysa@gmail.com, or by leaving it as a reply to any of the tweets we make about it on the Twitter. And we'll see you next time. But until then, I've been Chorpsaway.
And I've been Zane Zero.
And this has been Coco Disaster. Sweet dreams.